Gory days are here to stay, the 80s horror show. Take a stroll down memory's lane, it's time to start the show.
The gory days, the gory days, the gory days.
The gory days.
It's 7:01 on Friday, the 13th of June. This is Big Dave, and it's time for you lazy bones to get out of bed. It's Black Cat Day in Crystal Lake. Who's that for? Welcome to the Gory Days, the show where we take a stroll down memory lane to remember our favorite horror movies from the 1980s and early 1990s. Last week and the week before, we've kind of moved away from the 1990s. We did Signs from 2002. Last week we did, not Get Out. What was the sound one where they can't talk and they have to be really quiet? The John Krasinski one. God, we did it last week. Whatever. There's people screaming at their iPods right now, but that was a really good one. But this week, we are going back to our roots with a 1980 classic. You've seen it on your iPods. The title, Friday the 13th from 1980. Really excited. But before that, listeners, you have no idea how excited I am to introduce today's guest. Her acting credits include Iron Man 3, CSI, Grey's Anatomy, Shades of Blue, and Gotham, just to name a few. Whew, let me catch my breath. I always start so hot as soon as I run in here and do these things. She recently received the Best Director nomination at the North Hollywood Film Festival, as well as the Best Actress Award at the New York City Horror Film Festival, the largest of the genre in New York, for the feature-length horror film that she directed. The film is Don't Look. It comes out soon, and we'll mention some upcoming festivals where you can and should catch that. Listeners, it's my pleasure to introduce actor, producer, writer, director, Luciana Faulhaber.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Gory Days. How are you doing?
Good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So we're just meeting for the first time, right?
Yeah.
And I have nothing up my sleeves?
Nope. We're keeping it fresh and we're keeping it on the spot.
Fantastic. So you're not a native, though, of LA, right? Where are you from?
I am not. I was born and raised in Brazil, in Rio, and then I moved to New York on a college scholarship. So I came out here to
New York?
To New York,
okay.
Yeah, to try my luck at the American dream.
Fantastic. And so Brazil, that means how many languages do you speak?
I speak Portuguese and English fluently, and my Spanish is in the works.
Okay.
Yeah.
That comes in handy here in California.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember being a kid and wanting to learn German, and my parents telling me, no, that's not going to get you anywhere unless you move. You got to stay here and you got to learn Spanish, but maybe I'll get around to that. So you studied in New York, and when did you move out to LA? How recently?
I was in New York for almost 10 years, and
Wow.
then I came out here a bit less than 5 years ago.
Okay.
So
and were you doing film in New York?
I wasn't. I went to school with a biology college scholarship, and I did research for a while, and then after I graduated, I needed a job, so I decided to become a teacher, and I taught for about 5 years, and I learned a lot during that time. Then during that time, I also started graduate school, and I went to Columbia Grad School, and I studied international politics. And I'm still really involved in the activism, part of life.
I was going to ask, because it's kind of fiery out there right now with the government shutdown and with the teachers on strike and things like that. It's a volatile time right now.
Yeah, and I think it's the right time to speak up and have a voice, not only on your social media platforms, but go out there, wear the shirt, and, speak for the cause.
Sure.
And during that time, it's when I started doing acting classes, after work, part-time, just for fun, and the next thing I know, I'm just quitting everything and becoming a full-time actor.
And moving all the way out to LA from New York?
Yeah.
Man, that's a huge move. Where did you end up?
That was a few years later. I stayed out there and learned theater, try to educate myself. I did a 2-year conservatory program, which I think education is very important. And then after that, I came out here to really, when I felt ready, to really start and jump right into the business.
That 2-year conservatory program you mentioned was the Meisner Conservatory Program, correct?
That's right. I started with Bill Esper out there.
Yes, I understand you worked with Bill Esper, did some research, learned a lot from you coming in here. To be completely honest, I do research when my guests come in here, and you are the largest person that I've ever had in here, the person with the most going for them, either currently or like the highest status. And so There's part of a recording that I'm going to put out with this where I realized who you were and thought, like, I don't know what I thought when I Googled you. It was like, your name came up right away. And yeah, you're in Iron Man and you're in CSI and watching your reel. Like, you're a real actor. You're in this for real. And it's humbling a little bit because I'm a little green. I moved here from Irvine and I'm still figuring out my niche in here. So you're an actor, but you're moving to directing and producing and you're kind of doing it all yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm humbled by hearing you, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I don't consider myself a celebrity, but yeah, I definitely work hard and I believe in the work, and that's why I'm an actor, you know. I think fame and success can't come with the work, so I definitely focus on that. This whole acting, writing, directing started because I wanted an opportunity. My partner Javier and I, Javier Gomez, he's Puerto Rican. We met in New York at our acting program, and he recruited me as a producer. You know, I always joke, I tell people the story of how he asked me out to dinner. We've been partnered up as acting partners throughout the years, and when we graduated, he invited me out to dinner. He's like, I have a proposition for you. And I was like, this is really weird.
Yeah.
So
interesting phrasing.
Yeah, I was like, all right. So we sat at this place, Café Morgador, which we still enjoy. And he just slid over like this envelope across the table. Like, I want you to take a look at this. And I was like, what the hell's going on? Like, is this like... felt a little bit like a drug deal.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is happening? So I opened up and it was a play. It was a Puerto Rican play. And he's like, I think you were a producer and I think we should produce this together. And at the time I remember saying, I don't know. I don't think it's for me. Let me think about it. And I kind of went in like, I guess I'll try it this time and see
what do you got to lose?
Yeah, and see how that, goes. And we did a off-Broadway show. It was in partnership with Teatro Yati out there, and we had the New York Times come out, and it was the first time they came out for a showcase code for equity. So we felt really honored, and their review wasn't the best, but it said something like, these kids are really brave, and we're like, well, there you go. We'll take that. We definitely are brave, and we did it best we could with what we had, and from that moment on, like, we just began our own partnership. We've been working together for 10 years now in our production company. Don't Look is our first feature film, and we did a short before that. So, from that, we were like, we needed opportunities as Latinos. We weren't getting seen for parts that we believe were part of our experience as Latino Americans. And, there's just so many prostitute, drug dealer roles you can audition for. So, especially when he's an educated Latino and I'm an educated Latina and everybody around us is of the same level. So we're like, why are we not listening to those stories? Why are we not, going out for doctors and journalists and engineers? Like, why is still so old-fashioned in the perception of our culture? So we started writing in that purpose. We wanted to really embody roles that we were proud of and that weren't out there for us at the time. So that's how we started.
That's amazing. So is the Puerto Rican theater circuit still happening? Does he still write plays, or is he pretty much moved on? You said you've been working together for 10 years now. I imagine he doesn't much have time for theater. He's moving away from film or to film.
Well, acting is acting, so we do what the heart calls for the project.
Oh, okay.
He didn't write the play that we directed and acted in. He actually, it was a Puerto Rican playwright, and he translated it, and he's done that for a few different works of art.
Oh, great.
He's really good at languages. He's a journalist, so that's how that project came about. And but we still travel in the theater world. He's a musical theater professional. He's incredibly versed, sings in 3 different languages. He sings in Portuguese, Spanish, English, and Italian.
Wow.
Like, yeah, he's kind of
romance languages.
Exactly. Well, if you meet him, you'll see that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
He's very romantic.
Was he in Don't Look? Is it the
he
gentleman?
Was.
Okay, I thought so.
He
I thought the name sounded familiar. Yeah. He was great.
Which is my favorite character of the entire film. So I always tell him, I'm like, we cut the movie in a way that you stole the show, because I really think that his character is the most lovable, caring character.
He definitely pops on screen. So do you find people are responding to the, I guess, mission statement that you're setting out to get your stories represented in a way that isn't stereotypical? Are people recognizing what you're doing? And
yeah,
have you found?
It's all about opportunities, all about having that door open. So Don't Look was a calling card. We had very little monies. We did a Kickstarter campaign. Everything else we joke is like, our rent money whenever we had and we could put into the film. And we made miracles with what we had. So Don't Look really was a calling card saying, look, we can make things. We can make things happen. Give us some money.
Yeah.
Believe in us. So from there, we've written a TV show called Scooped, and it's about a Latino coming of age kid who gets his first job at a dying newspaper in New York, and it's based on Javier's true life story.
Okay.
And that's where he met Luis Miranda, which is Lin-Manuel's dad, and he still works with them. So it's interesting how that experience nowadays for us is like still so recent. There was a Russian spy in the room at the time that was his mentor.
Wow.
Look at where we are again, like talking about Russians.
Yeah.
So we created that show, and we've been pitching and pushing it out, around town. And trying
so you filmed the pilot already and everything?
We didn't film it. We're trying to raise the money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then from there, we did another pilot pitch, which we did shoot, called House Sitting. We're in the process of editing, and that's about a woman who has her heart broken out of New York. She's a nurse and expecting to marry this doctor, just to turn out not exactly like that. So she decides to just uproot her life and change.
And you've been doing all of this in-house just by just the two of you? Or have you expanded your production operation?
Well, I can never say it's just the two of us. It does take a village to do anything. And my advice to anyone starting is know who your friends are and stick close together and partner and collaborate and help each other as much as you can. So Javier is definitely my home base. Like we work together really well. We complement each other. And people can come and go, but we're still going to be together. So that's our attitude towards production and the work we do together. That said, we are always looking for partners, and we're always out there. For Don't Look, we had incredible people that, came through and helped us finish. We also had a lot of shitty people that we had to fire and fight. A lot of people trying to steal the money that we were able to put together.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stories of making your first film that, not going to film school comes with a price. So we learned a lot through that experience. So our goal is really to meet partners who see things how we see, that what matters is the work, and what we're trying to do is something that speaks not only to us, but to a generation, that can in the future feel proud of what we've made.
So collaboration is absolutely important, and I want to know what you can speak to as far as people like me or anyone who's listening out there who also didn't go to film school and feels daunted by the lack of education, the lack of, the jargon and the different responsibilities between everybody on set and understanding that. And how have you and what can you speak toward to navigating that without going to film school and just having one side of the experience, in front of the camera?
Well, I will say this. The internet teaches you anything you need to learn.
Oh, yeah.
So I will say, if you don't have the opportunity, and film school is expensive, it really is. For that much money, you can make 2 films, 3 films, and learn on the spot. But with that said, like I said before, like it comes with a price. We lost money at different places. We maybe worked with people we wouldn't have if we've had the experience of film school, because we've been able to spot those problems early on versus later down the line. But that said, I much rather put my money into going out there and learning by doing than sitting in a classroom and, once I finish, have all this debt and then try to figure out how to get a job in the industry. So I say go on the internet, search as much as you can, learn, be self-taught, like learn as much as you can. Again, with connections with your relationships, like we raised our money with our friends and family to do this film. Kickstarter is still out there, but it's not necessary.
You did Kickstarter?
Yeah, we did Kickstarter. There's many different platforms now for crowdfunding, but you can just go straight to your family and friends and say, hey, it's my birthday. What I want for my birthday is I want to make this happen.
Yeah. So
can each one of you give me a little bit, and then I can go do it, And then also look for people who know what they're doing. Reach out, email. Like I met a lot of directors when we were making Don't Look. I asked a lot of their experiences and opinions and what worked for them, what didn't work for them. And they were all receptive to talking to me. Mike Flanagan, who's done a lot of great horror, who's super successful now. Like, he was, when we met, was just when he was about to break. And we had a talk over a drink at the ArcLight, waiting to see a movie. And I remember thinking, this was such a valuable time. Like, thank you just for sitting and talking to me for an hour about being a director of a low budget horror film and how to make that as successful as possible. So my advice is, when you meet someone that speaks to you, that is available, or, there's nothing wrong to say, hey, I have some questions. Can I talk to you for like 10 minutes?
Yeah.
And most people are more than willing to give you that time.
And so what I hear from that is, don't wait. That the best way to demonstrate to somebody that you know what you're doing is to do it over and over and over. And if the first one doesn't work out, you'll learn something from it, and you'll learn something from that.
The first one will never work out.
Yeah.
Just expect that, And I listen to and I read a lot of different directors. Like, Hitchcock never went to film school. He used to shoot with skateboards and different things, whatever he could find. Like, he would find a way to work that into making something different.
And he was working with film, physical film. We've come so far in technology that we now have like better cameras than he ever could have had in our pockets. And people are able to make things and do make things. I just had to put it on silent, I realized. People do make things every day with just like, in their house. And people do these amazing things on YouTube. And I remember some of the Vine videos that people would create with just a few seconds of footage. So what I hear is, don't wait.
No, there is no waiting.
Yeah.
If you're going to sit and wait, trust me, 10 other people are going to be way ahead of you in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You're
one of them.
Well, absolutely. Because I learned that it doesn't matter how much talent you have and how serious you are about what you do, no one is going to give you an opportunity. They just won't, until you go out there and you do it and you say, I'm going to do it with or without you. And when the moment they learn that, most of the time they're like, all right, let me take a look at what you're doing. Lena Waithe is somebody else that I admire a lot. I met her before she broke out, and, watching her grow and bring the people that have been with her through the entire process to see everybody succeed. It's incredible. It's an incredible lesson. It's different in Brazil because I think it's different everywhere. I think even in America, if people haven't gone to a place, where they hope to make their dreams come true, they truly don't understand. And that could be anywhere. It could be a stockbroker in New York, or an actor in LA, or, the best cattle rancher in Utah. Who knows? But if you're trying to break into a business and you are, educating yourself and learning and trying, I think it's hard for people outside of that realm understand what you're doing. They respect it, and a lot of times they hate it because they wish I was closer.
Do your parents do they like understand what you're doing? Do they appreciate?
I don't think they did until the first time they saw me out there on either TV or film. The first time they came out to see me on the movies were Iron Man 3, and everybody was so excited. They watched them film like 3 times. And it was I was too. It was great. I didn't tell a lot of my friends, I told one friend, and I told them to bring everybody else to see the film. And halfway through the film, if you've seen it, I kind of pop out to from the covers,
yes,
and
do.
Everybody just kind of screamed because they're like, "Oh my God!" Nobody knew it was kind of a nice prank.
And I'm pretty sure Ben Kingsley gives you a name, but you're credited as Mandarin Girl #1. That's a shame. That's a real shame.
Shane Black. What's with that?
He calls you like Veronica, I think, or
Nessie.
something. Nessie. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Vanessa. It's
Vanessa,
like Nessie.
That's it. Nessie.
And he throws me a cookie. It's a funny story too, because he's married to a Brazilian woman, so we had definitely some things to talk about during set.
That's fun.
Yes, he's such an amazing actor.
Academy Award winner.
And he's such a professional. It was amazing to work with him and to watch him work. And again, somebody who was really about the work. He was on time, he was respectful, and he was, pleasant to everybody. And it's just watching that from somebody so successful is definitely like, I want to be like that.
So over everything that you've done, your whole career and everything that you're proud of, what's the best thing you've learned? What's the biggest thing that you take away that you tried to hold on to that is...
I mean, it's cliche, but the end of the day...
That's the industry.
Yeah, the end of the day is like, just don't give up, because there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. I remember when I got my first TV co-star, which was CSI, and I was like, now it's going to happen. Now it's going to be amazing, and I'm going to get all these jobs. I think it was like another year before I booked something else, So, and I remember one of my friends telling me, he's like, oh, honey, yeah, it's not like that. Like, good luck. But, that's the truth. It's just like understanding that it is a roller coaster, and you have to stick with it. And 2016, 2015 were really difficult years for me. And last year was just different. It was a year that doors opened and people were interested in what I had to say. So you just don't know.
Yeah, no, this didn't fall into your lap. You worked hard for this, and it's working out. And I wish you the best. I really hope that everything goes well for you. And when does Don't Look release? It's in May?
Yes, Don't Look is coming out later this year. We're waiting to hear the official from the distributor. We're working with Wild Eye Releasing out of New York. They do a lot of horror. They're fantastic. And we have some fun stuff coming up for you guys. But we're going to be at the Atlanta Latino Film Festival in April of this year. And we're going to be at the Future Femme Film Festival also later this year. Dates are a bit pending. We're waiting to hear from everyone, and we're happy to tell everybody. So check us out at don'tlookthemovie.com or our social media. Instagram is at don'tlookthemovie.
And where can people find you online, your work, or if they're interested in reaching out to you?
Yeah, I'm all over. Not Twitter very much, but I'm on, I have a Facebook page. You're welcome to go follow me and send me a message through that. You can go to my Instagram. I always say don't inbox me because I get a lot of that, and there's different ways, and I don't really look. So if you want to talk to me, post on a picture and say, hey, I have a question about whatever. Hey, and then we can find a way to communicate. I also have an email available on my Instagram that I do check, so you can send an email that way.
And they can just look your name up on Instagram or anything like that? That's
Luciana Faulhaber Official.
Okay.
And you'll see that's my actual page. That's the one with the blue check, and that's me.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, coming up after the break, more Luciana Faulhaber, more The Gory Days, and we'll be talking about our movie Friday the 13th when we come back.
The Gory Days.
Welcome back to The Gory Days. That, of course, was Abject Silence with nothing else going on. Today's movie is Friday the 13th from 1980. If you haven't seen this movie, pause your podcast right now and go watch it. Wasn't that great? In case you didn't have the patience to go and watch it right this second, we'll go over a quick synopsis. A group of camp counselors are stalked and murdered by an unknown assailant while trying to reopen a summer camp which, years before, was the site of a child's drowning. So Friday the 13th released in Friday, May 9th, 1980, very similar to your May release, across the United States, nationwide, distributed by Paramount Pictures. It earned $5,816 in its opening weekend and finally grossed $59 million. This was an independent horror film, just like Don't Look, that somehow was able to branch out nationwide and then internationally and bring almost $60 million 1980 dollars. That's about $200 million 2019 dollars now.
Man, I could use some of that money.
Wouldn't that be insane?
Yeah. Guys, watch my movie too. Let's make that happen.
It was released internationally, which is really unusual for independent films, especially with no-name actors and stuff in it. But it ended up being the highest-grossing film of the entire Friday the 13th franchise. No Friday the 13th movie since this one has made more money. So that's pretty cool. It was up against movies like The Shining, Dressed to Kill, and The Fog at the time when it came out, and ended up being the 18th highest-grossing film of 1980. I don't know why I wrote that down. That seems interesting. So the screenplay was written in 1979 by Victor Miller, who I don't know what else he's written, but the director was Sean S. Cunningham, who had most recently worked with Wes Craven on the 1979 film Last House on the Left. Have you seen the posters for this film?
Yeah, I mean, when you Google it, I mean, everything comes up.
Yeah.
The funny anecdote is that, we growing up in Brazil before the internet, everything came to us about 10 years later. So even though Friday the 13th was an 80s movie, to us growing up, it was a 90s movie.
Interesting.
Which was very curious when I moved to America, because we're talking about like Pretty in Pink and other Breakfast Club. I'm like, oh, that's a great 90s movie. And they're like, that's not a 90s movie. There's an 80s. I'm like, no, but I saw it. I'm so confused. So it took a second for me to realize that, like, because we didn't have the internet, things took so long to get down to Brazil and I'm sure other countries, that some of that cultural things, which I consider the 90s, is the 80s here.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So when did you see this? You saw it in theaters?
I saw it when I was a child. I
Yeah?
have an older sister, and she really loved
How old were
horror.
you?
Well, let's not talk about those lady things.
Oh,
on the
sorry.
air. But I have an older sister, and she and her friends loved horror movies. But for some reason, where we lived, there was an empty apartment in the building. And I guess we knew who belonged to, because I remember all of us kids like gathering there with pillows and like kind of like a slumber party. And
But to watch horror movies?
To watch horror movies back to back all night.
Oh, wow.
Friday the 13th was one of them. Poltergeist was another one
classic.
and then 1 through 4. There was one night there was a Poltergeist like marathon.
Yeah.
So like Damien, like there's so many of those
Oh,
movies.
yeah.
So it's kind of how my interest for horror sparked. I was terrified of them. I was afraid of the Gremlins. So how like much of a wuss I was as a child, but I wanted to be cool and I wanted to hang out with the older kids. So this was one of those movies. Like my
totally
parents
get that.
would have never let me go to the theater to watch this.
So is that kind of like how it started? This was the first movie you saw that got you started into horror?
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
I mean, I couldn't say what was the first, but it was definitely.
I guess that's hard to say. Yeah.
It was definitely within that marathon period. And for Javier, it was similar. He grew up in Puerto Rico, and horror movies was the way to escape and have an exciting time and see some skin. And we were all into that exploration time of life.
Well, that's what I love about horror is, unlike any genre, it plays with things like it casts actors who are no names because they're probably going to die in horrific ways. So it's a great way for a lot of actors to get their first start. And it deals with themes like how far will a father go to protect his children, or how much is one willing to sacrifice to survive, or things like that make us look to, oh, I would do that in that situation, or oh, I would do this and I would survive, and that's stupid that they're doing. It makes us like think of the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, and fear is an universal feeling, It's something that anybody can relate to, and it does well internationally because there's a lot of action.
Yeah. And fear is universal. It goes against, it goes through language barriers and philosophies. Everyone is afraid of something, and the more universal the fear, usually the better the movie.
Yeah, and it's kind of a landmark now to have not unknown actors, because if you do have known actors, you already expect them not to die.
Yes, exactly.
So it's kind of a bit of a giveaway.
It's like Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock, when you cast a big name and then she gets killed halfway through the movie. Spoiler alert for a 60-year-old movie. It's a big shock because you thought that's the big name.
Right. So, it became more acceptable to have people that are not known. It's better for the film because you're not following a person, you're following the story. Mm-hmm. But, there's still great movies out there with plenty of well-known actors that do very well. So. And
just from like from a plot standpoint, they break barriers and challenge tropes. A lot of the times in movies, children are safe, and anytime you see a kid like, oh, something's falling, someone's gonna run by and push them out of the way at the last second. Not in a horror movie. That kid might die, and every time it happens, it's like, oh man, that raises the stakes. Who knows what's gonna happen? So I can't really tell how old the people in this movie are supposed to be. I think they're adults, but they certainly act like a bunch of horny teens, and they all have wine and like vodka and stuff, I think, at some point. So I don't know how old these people are, but the poster. So you remember the poster? It's that silhouette of the like. I guess it's supposed to look like a chalk drawing of somebody who died, but then superimposed is the Camp Crystal Lake. I was interested to find out that was designed by Alex Ebel to promote the U.S.'s film release, but it was marketed along with the trailers as a lighthearted, youth-oriented horror film. That's kind of like a comedy, literally to draw in that demographic of like young kids and stuff like that. So this movie had a ton of taglines. I'm just going to go through some of them. I'm not going to read all of them, but some of my favorites were, on Friday the 13th, they begin to die horribly, one by one. And Lucky 13? I think not. Fridays will never be the same again. They were warned, they were doomed, and on Friday the 13th, nothing will save them. These old horror movies have a great way, because posters these days, it's different. A movie poster. I don't know. Do you do movie posters and marketing for your film? Was that something you had to look into?
We had a lot of different versions of placeholder images, and we just got from our distributor our new poster, and we're so excited to share.
Nice.
We're not allowed to share it yet,
right.
but
Can't wait to see it.
oh my God, I can't wait to share it. We're so excited. So and I think images, especially in such a visual world that we live in, they're very important.
Yes. So as I understand it, a movie will typically have 2 to 3 main posters. There's the teaser that typically shows as little as possible and just a title. There's the main poster that comes out once everyone's familiar. There's a few character posters, maybe if it's a big thing. And then there's the final one that usually has like a big splash of all the characters superimposed, an enormous Robert Downey Jr., a teeny tiny Ben Kingsley, and things like that. For this one, though, as far as I know, it was just that one poster. And so people, like you say, a picture says 1,000 words.
And you were different times,
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, we all know the power of marketing.
That's it, too, is like back then, you couldn't look this up. You couldn't go, oh, Friday the 13th, I'm going to go home and read a bunch of articles about it and go on Reddit and see what people are talking. There was nothing. There was just, ooh, what is that?
Yeah, I was watching a documentary recently about this couple who lived in Hollywood, and she was what they called a film researcher, which I've never heard about, but basically was a library where filmmakers could go and research things for their film. So if you're making a movie about a campground in the 80s, like she would have books and pictures of what would that look like. And it's interesting because it never occurred to me. I was like, now we just Google it. It's on the internet. It's everywhere. But at the time, I'm like, okay, if you're making a movie like I don't know, about the Third Reich or something.
You'd have to go to the library.
Yeah, where do you go research those things so they are accurate with the time? And it was like, oh my God, it's so different now. We have everything at our fingertips.
That would be redundant. There's no reason for that building to exist anymore. It's all on
and
Wikipedia.
Oh, yeah.
That's a shame. Oh,
doesn't,
man. That would be cool to have a place like that. If only just for like a hub for collaborators to think like, oh, well, I know everyone here is working on something I'm working on. I bet that's what it's like to be in film school when you go to the library and things like that.
Well, probably. And then they become your peers later.
Yeah, exactly. Like Steven Spielberg ends up being friends with George Lucas, and then the rest is history. So as you may or may not know, this movie kind of gave a birth to the subgenre that is slasher films. Up until now, we had horror films, but most of them were like Poltergeist or Last House on the Left or the Amityville Horror, where it was ghosts or just supernatural of some kind. This, along with Halloween and to a lesser extent, Nightmare on Elm Street, kind of gave birth to this slasher individual, one memorable character that people will see on a poster and go, oh, it's that one. Jason, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Chucky comes a little bit later, 1988, but all of these kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface, like anytime you see the horror icons of the 80s, Jason Voorhees is up there. Ironically, Jason isn't in this movie very much. I remember learning this as a kid. I was always into horror movies, and I remember learning this trivia fact was like, oh, actually, Jason isn't in the first movie. He doesn't show up until the second. The first movie is Pamela Voorhees. Spoiler alert, we're going to get into that. But yes, the killer in this movie is the mother, which brings up a whole swath of different themes and gender presuppositions. But before we get into that, this movie spawned 10 sequels. 10 Friday the 13th sequels. They're finally done as far as I know, but there was this one, Part 2, Friday the 13th Part 3, Friday the 13th The Final Chapter, A New Beginning, Part 6, Jason Lives, Part 7, The New Blood, my favorite, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, Jason X, which ironically is the 10th film in the genre, So Jason X kind of has a play on words for also being the Roman numeral 10. Freddy versus Jason, the phoned in whoever wins, we lose. Did you ever see that one? Freddy versus Jason?
I kind of, after a certain number, I was like, time for a new...
Yeah. And finally, the 2009 remake, Friday the 13th, which when you said we were watching Friday the 13th, I wasn't sure which one you meant. And I thought for a second, maybe I'll just watch both just in case. I'm glad I asked.
I'm not a fan of remakes. I feel like there's a lot of messing up with classics these days.
There's too many people out there with original stories for us to be relegated to sequel after sequel after remake. And some of these, like now we're getting remakes of sequels, like the new Halloween, where it's supposed to be a sequel of the original, but it's kind of a reboot. So weird. And Disney is taking the baton with this. Aladdin, Mulan, Dumbo, all of these live action, Lion King, all of these live action remakes of the things that we find nostalgic. Nostalgia makes money. And it makes sense from a studio executive standpoint. If someone was breathing down your back saying, we need to make money this summer, and you had a choice between a no-name script with a good idea or another comic book movie, then the easy decision is the comic book movie because it's going to make more money, or the sequel, or, people are afraid to take chances. And so it's so great when people like you and John Krasinski and these people can come up out of the woodwork, present a brand new idea, and people love it. The unfortunate part is that other people will think, oh, now we can make sequels of that, and that'll be the next Purge franchise. Ugh.
Well, it's true. I mean, and again, it's all about access. Kaczynski can make anything he wants because he is recognizable and he's had a certain amount of connections in the industry.
Yeah.
So, it's all kind of connected.
So this movie takes place, it's Camp Crystal Lake, which apparently is a real place. It's not called Camp Crystal Lake, but it's a Boy Scout lake that is still open and still gives tours. And you can go there in Connecticut or in Pennsylvania, take a tour of a bunch of filming locations and get memorabilia from the movie. That's pretty cool. But the story, so let's break it down. The story of Friday the 13th is way back in 1957. Jason drowned. Pamela Voorhees was a chef working at Camp Crystal Lake, and her developmentally disabled son Jason, who looks, we only get like one good shot of him, but he looks like he's got hydrocephalus, like his head is overexpanded and everything. He needs help. And so one day when Pamela Voorhees was cooking, doing her job, I don't remember, the camp counselors who were supposed to be watching Jason as he was swimming in the lake were having sex. They were getting
getting busy.
Yeah, they were getting busy. And Pamela Voorhees blames them because Jason drowned that day and they weren't watching him. They were off having sex. So her whole modus operandi is to kill horny camp counselors to punish them for the death of her son 30 years ago. Because this takes place, it's technically 1980 because it says the present. I love it when we say the present because when you saw it, it was the 90s.
Exactly.
So that was the present. But it takes place in 1988, and those opening credits is where we get that first sound cue from the composer, whose name I will get to a little bit later, that everybody recognizes that from Friday the 13th as being like, oh, that's the Jason sound. Whenever he's walking around parodies, I've always seen it. So and apparently that is supposed to be a reference to Jason saying, kill, 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 ma, ma, ma. The voice that Pamela Voorhees has going through her head. Really weird. So essentially we've got our main characters, Annie, I've got them all here, Marcy, Ned, Jack, Bill, and Brenda. These are the kids that are working for Steve Christie along with Alice at Camp Crystal Lake, aka Camp Blood. That's opening up for another year of camp coming up, so they're supposed to be up there getting ready for the incoming students. Marcy, Jack, and Ned, Jack played by Kevin Bacon in his first role, which I thought was fun. You get to see him in a Speedo at one point, which was a treat. Are friends, and they're coming up together where they meet Steve Christie, his assistant / lover, Alice, and they're like 20 years difference, and that's pretty weird. We see...
Yeah, because it doesn't happen now.
Yeah, that's totally true. But Steve, the first time we see him, there's some wonderful... So I love to point to body objectification in both senses. So there's lots of female body objectification in this movie easily. We get like some full-on nudity. But Steve Christie, the first time we see him, he's in short shorts and he's wearing nothing. And he's like chopping that wood. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, why don't we have that anymore? Let's bring back short shorts from the 80s.
I like it. I think that's equality right there.
Exactly. Like, do you remember like basketball shorts used to be so skimpy and tiny? Let's bring those back.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a fan of the long ones.
So Ned Christie, I also wrote down the moments of harassment here because there's a lot of it. The first character that we meet who is, I thought it was our hero, and I feel like it's a Hitchcockian
play on the genre.
Exactly,
Yeah, I think so.
because we introduce Annie, and she talks to a dog, and it's like, oh, we like her, and she's so happy-go-lucky, and everything's going great for her, and she goes to the diner, and everyone looks at her weird when she says Camp Crystal Lake, but that doesn't faze her, and she's super great. She's the first death. Well, after the 1958 deaths.
Well, she doesn't even get there, which is kind of
No,
sad.
it's sad. She keeps asking people. The first person she asks is Enos, and he drives her like halfway, I guess.
And it's like, what I like about that character is that she takes a ride from a oil tank person,
Yes.
like some guy who normally in the real world you'd never take a ride from.
No.
But then later on you find out that the killer is a woman and she took a ride from a nice lady and then ends up murdered. But what I don't understand is like she wasn't even having sex. All she talked about is how excited she was about like helping kids and how she was meant to work with kids.
That's a great point, because this movie, like I said in the beginning, it tries to hold this like moral thing over everyone's head, like, ooh, you shouldn't have sex or else someone's going to kill you. There's only 2 people in this movie there's 2 couples that have sex and are punished for it. Otherwise,
Right.
everyone else is just killed.
Yeah, they're just like brushing their teeth, and then it's like, oh my God, who are you? But it's interesting too. I really like the way they use the mystery part of it.
Yes,
and I try to
the point of view.
recreate some of that. And it's like you only see how scared they are, and you don't ever see a hand or anything, so you don't know who the killer really is.
But you assume it's a man the whole time, and they do that on purpose. It's really fun.
Well, I think that assumption comes from, women, the feeling that women are more nurturing.
Absolutely.
I don't think that that's something that the film did successfully. I think they just played on our own preconceptions.
Okay.
Which is like, oh, if it's bad, it's probably a man.
Especially when they set it up that like Ralph is this guy that they need to watch out for. They
Right.
kind of feed like, ooh, is
The
Ralph the
creepy
killer?
dude.
Yeah. But and then he's in the pantry at some point for no reason, and then just rides away on his bike and they let him go. But no, you're right. That's interesting because the only glimpses we see are shots from the killer's perspective,
Right.
chasing Annie or chasing Brenda or things like that. And I think the most we get is maybe her shoes and. There's nothing. Women wear shoes. Why can't
Right.
women wear shoes? Why can't women be killers? Especially old women. So
And think about it, like that's one of the first films of the genre, and it was already breaking grounds, to begin with.
yeah,
But then, if you think about it too, there's like a whole sequence of films where women are kind of crazy and murderous.
oh yeah. One of the ones that I think of is one that came pretty soon after this and followed the trope is Sleepaway Camp. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah.
Which kind of undoes all of the good that this movie could have done. But Pamela Voorhees kills 11 people throughout the movie. She kills the 2 counselors at the beginning. She kills Annie by slitting her throat in the forest. I loved her. I really wanted her to.
But it was a great kill. Oh my God.
She is really good.
Thinking that this is the 80s and the kind of effects that they had.
That throat cut.
That was great.
And all of the blood, yeah. Honestly, all of the effects in here, they were done by
I agree.
Tom Savini, the visual effects designer. And yeah, the arrows going through Bill when he's up against the door, the blood going through Jack's neck, like the
was
bubbles.
Great.
Super gross. The axe in what's her face, like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's super great. There's so the one person I want to make sure I give a big shout out to is Adrienne King, the actress who played Alice. She's amazing. She carries the last like third of this movie when all of her friends are already dead, and there's that one moment where Brenda's body like is hurled through the window, and there's just this long shot. It's just one shot of her like just walking from the window to the other side of the room, staring at her friend's body, and then bolting out of there. And I thought like, God, she's really good. I was interested to hear that originally they planned for her character to be kind of like Laurie Strode in Halloween and be reoccurring, but she was getting stalked by fans. And so she said, I don't want to be part of these movies anymore. Like, this is ruining my life. So.
And obviously that was before social media.
Yeah.
Now they'd be like, yes, make me famous. It's such a different time.
It's really different. Like who knows like how bad it must have got that she didn't want to do this thing that could have made her a millionaire. Like when it was her personal safety.
But then exactly, you have to
Yeah.
think about happiness. Like, do you want to live like that?
You have to think about surviving. Like, yeah, this guy whoever it was, it could have been a woman. Could have been, yeah. So that's something I'm trying to break, honestly. Like, I can't call myself a feminist, but I try to recognize, especially in this podcast, the moments when movies do challenge the patriarchy and challenge those presuppositions and quite honestly prejudices. And so that's why I like this movie for objectifying the men and the women. To be fair, you can't objectify the men as much as you do the women simply because of, censorship rules.
Right.
But, yeah. Let's see what happens. Oh, we skipped some things, but I feel like... Oh, the other thing I want to mention is that barricade scene. I don't remember who the final person who dies that makes Alice, snap. But she goes inside and she starts barricading the house up. And she starts using ropes and she starts pushing things. And a lot of the times in movies when people do that and they go to barricade something, it's always the same thing. It's always like a piece of wood that they nail to a door that opens out. Or something silly. I remember just sitting there and thinking... That looks like it's gonna hold. She looks pretty smart, and it's just from a actor standpoint, the idea of having to secure the door for real and actually make it so this, no one's gonna get through here. She did a good job. It was very.
And as an actor, that's a gift.
Yeah.
Action is pretty part of acting. Acting is action, it's not talking. So when you have something that is real, that you're in the moment doing, I always joke around. I'm like, when you walk into a set, it's so real. The way that they build it for TV and film, it's so incredibly real that if you can't really get into the moment, I'm like, just look around. So in a sense, when you feel that there is a sense of danger and you have to physically barricade yourself, that's a gift for an actor.
Have you ever had to work with green screens and stuff? Because that's something I've understood is much harder because you don't have the world.
Yeah, very little. I don't have a lot of experience with the green screen. For our film, we tried very much to do everything as practical as possible.
Good.
Because I think it helps everyone. It helps in post, it helps the actors, it makes it all more of a real experience.
Sure. And I apologize for not roping the don't look back in, but I'm hesitant on what I'm allowed to say and what I can. So please feel free to, because you mentioned that this was an inspiration for your movie. And so I read that you had a story credit or a writing credit. How much did you contribute to the original?
So the story of Don't Look was kind of sparked by one of our producers' family's story. One Thanksgiving I spent with them, and they're a very all-American family from Pennsylvania, which is the home of horror. And during Thanksgiving, they mentioned, briefly the story of some relative that one day was found dead in the garage, and no one really called the police or questioned him. They just buried him. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm like, how, many years ago. But I'm like, well, wouldn't you at least want to know what happened? So I found that was kind of weird. And then from there, I'm like, well, if that's true, what else is true? But, that's Pennsylvania is the home of hunting. Everybody has a gun. Everybody's loaded. It's just kind of how there's, a lot of game heads everywhere. That's just the culture of the area.
Oh, okay.
So, when they told me the story, they were kind of like, yeah, we all have guns. We just assumed something happened. But I was like... Okay, that's an assumption.
And we were satisfied.
So from that, I was like, okay, that's a really interesting story. And if that's true, what else can be true about this world? So we kind of built the story around the location because I found it so interesting, So I went home and I remember calling Javier. I was like, Javi, I want to make this film. I think it's like a horror and it's in Pennsylvania and he was like, okay, let's do it. And then we started asking around and people were like, no, you can't make a feature. And we're like,
I bet, yeah.
All right, well, then we're not making it with you then. And, finally, we found a team that was game. And I had a friend, Jess, who ended up writing the script. She's a brilliant writer. I wrote a outline and I gave it to her. And I was like, this is what I see happening. And she's so talented. She went and wrote 5 different script versions.
Oh, my God.
And they were all incredible.
Oh,
and we always wish, I always say this, I wish we could have made the first script she's ever made. But it was definitely $1 million budget. And I remember thinking, oh my God, we don't have this money.
A little too ambitious.
For sure, because, she wanted it to have a lot of intrinsic, brilliant, shadowing, mirroring things, which all great scripts have, but we just didn't have the budget.
Sure.
And now she works at in production. She's like, man, I wish if I had the experience then that I have now with production, I would be able to write a script that was way more fitted to our budget.
Well, hopefully you'll find a way back to each other. That would be amazing.
Oh, we're so great friends, and I'm sure we'll work together again. But we, so that time, she spent a year writing incredible versions of that script, and we commissioned her for very little money because we didn't have any. And she just wanted to make a film too. So it was kind of that perfect partnership. And like I said, we're still great friends as we continue to move forward in our careers. And I do hope we work together. And then the script was ready and we started a Kickstarter and we went on to get funds for this film. But in the process, we found a lot of partners, like the farm that we shot at. It's called Plow Farms, and it's in Pennsylvania.
Right, in Plowville.
In Plowville. And funny enough, like the opening scene of Friday the 13th with that barn place, it's almost exactly like the one we had to
Very
shoot
close
in.
quarters, very dark. Yeah.
It also had a second floor. The stairs were similar, and it's their
I think I know what you're talking about. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
it's their slaughter place for the farm, and even that was very similar. Like we have a scene in the bathroom when you see the feet and they're talking, kind of like girl talk. That's also part of the inspiration from Friday the 13th. But we were just happy to be there, and my friends, Lindsay Eshelman it's her family's farm, and she's also in the film.
Oh, okay.
She plays Nicole.
Oh, she was great.
Yeah, she was great. And I remember when I told her parents, I was like, hey, so we wrote this film and we wanted to shoot here. Can we shoot here? And I remember like her mom and dad sitting there and they're like, okay. I don't really think they understood what that
sure,
meant.
because the things you do.
Because they're like, sure. And then when we finally showed up with like 30 people and we were shooting in the house, and I mean they were so gracious because there's so much stuff that happened, but we had to literally destroy their living room, number one. For like a whole month they couldn't sit and watch TV because we had to make it look like it was a closed down house and there was nobody living in it.
And it's all the same night, right?
It all happens the same night.
Yeah.
So we had to destroy that and leave the way it was for like a month.
For continuity, oh boy.
We were, all the crew, we try to hire as many local hire people as we could just to support the community, but as well to make our life easier. But at the same time, we actually, whoever wasn't, was from New York or the close vicinities, they slept in the house with us. So we called
like in sleeping bags?
In basically air mattresses.
Okay.
We had to step up from the sleeping bags.
Good.
But we were like, this is basically like a film sweatshop. In one room in the basement was all the boys, and in one room in the basement was all the girls.
That's how it gets done.
Yeah, so we just, and everybody was game, which was great. Not, we had our issues, but mostly everybody was great.
Any pranks?
No pranks, thank God. I think we were so...
That can slow things down.
And we were so tired because there was no sleeping. Our team was production-wise was very small. So, Javier and I and Lindsay had to like triple ourselves with everything that we were doing. Like I was lucky enough that when I started to like jump into the directing, they needed to like step up for the producing, and like it kind of really worked out well, but I couldn't have done it without them because my producing role, I couldn't really help as much as I would want to because I was also directing. So,
yeah, that's too much for anybody.
Yeah, so I was lucky I had a good team, and but I remember when I was directing, there's a scene where I have my lingerie and I'm running and covered in blood around this farm.
Yes.
But
I was wondering about that.
What people don't know is that when you direct and you're dressed for a scene, I couldn't put my clothes on because that fake blood is very sticky. So the moment that I would dress myself, everything would be ruined. So we have to waste time to like set up the blood again. So I basically directed in my underwear for like 3 days in like 40-degree weather.
I was wondering, was it cold?
It was very cold.
Oh, you poor thing.
It snowed the last day that we were there. Like it was so cold.
Oh, I would have had no idea.
I know. So we were, there was a scene where one of our actors dies and he's shivering so much we had to stop because I'm like, now you look too alive because you're shaking too much, So
that's the funny thing. In this movie, there's a couple moments where they're straight up breathing, and I'm like, oh, come on.
I know.
It must be hard.
It's very hard
to play a dead body.
I remember my friend's mom at some point looked at me and she's like, aren't you going to put some clothes on? But I'm like, I want to,
I'm working.
but I can't, So we had great anecdotes and great moments. And again, we couldn't have made this film without, the Eshelmans and without the farm and without the community. We'll have people come over and like bring us food and drop some pies. And, when you are on a budget, like that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
We made sure that our crew got paid, whatever we could. We wanted everyone to be respected and feel like they had a job.
Good.
But we were very conscious of the difficulties. So we wanted everybody to eat well. And, we made sure that there was plenty of food all the time and plenty of warmth and in places that they could be warm and rest. And, but at the end of the movie, we ended up torching some things. And,
yes.
Yeah, that was also
I don't want to spoil anything, but yes, that was amazing.
You know what was funny? Like
it's in the trailer, I guess.
It's in the trailer, yeah.
So,
We wanted to blow up a bus. And we had the bus, and we were like, yeah, this is going to be amazing. But when you blow up things, like, you know, pieces of that kind of go everywhere. So we needed like a specialist who could do that safely. And that's where we couldn't do it. We couldn't find someone who was like a pyrotechnics specialist who would do it for like an affordable price.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we probably couldn't afford that insurance either.
You need the fire marshal probably.
Well, we had to have that anyways because we had to burn something down. So our compromise was, why don't we just burn down a building or something?
Sure.
And I would tell you, there were a lot of volunteers saying, you can burn down my house.
So in the original script, it was to blow up a bus?
A bus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
yeah, that's ambitious.
When you watch the film, and like you see that we shoot in the bus for most of the time, so our idea was to just torch that at the end.
Was that just there, or was that something you had to get as well?
No, we got that donated to us from Eshelman Transport. So we were very lucky to be able to have that.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of people who are willing to help you out. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we needed a generator at some point, and remember we didn't have one, and you know, Lindsay was like, oh, let me get in my car and drive to the next farm over and see if they have one. Let me drive to the next farm, and then they did. They're like, oh yeah, take it, just bring it back whenever.
That's great.
You know, which is also so trusting, because I would be like, who would be like, come
These
into my
kids,
house, take my stuff, bring it back whenever. So that's a plus from shooting in small towns, because everybody's so excited
Different
and
than
so
LA.
welcoming. You know, when you watch the film, there's a lot that happens at a Christmas tree field, and there's a lot of screaming involved because, you know, it's a horror movie.
Yeah.
So I remember the day after that scene happened, my friend's dad woke up and he's like, you guys, were you at the Christmas tree field last night? And we're like, yeah, we were. He's like, well, listen to this voicemail. And he plays this voicemail, and this guy's like, Greg, something is happening at the Christmas tree field and it's not good. There's a lot of screaming. I'm not sure, but you should call the cops. And we were just like laughing hysterical. We're like, oh my God. But,
That's hilarious.
That's hilarious. Somebody probably drove by.
I know, poor guy.
And was like, something is happening. But, you know, that's also the security of the area. Everybody knows each other and everybody's there for each other. It's really something that we don't get in a major city.
Yeah.
So my recommendation is whoever's making a movie, try to make it somewhere where it's small and they're excited to have you.
Yeah, no, that's something I've realized is a lot of the times these movies, like the smaller your script, like cast-wise and locations, like maybe if there's only 2 locations and 4 characters, the more likely it is people will take a chance on yours because it doesn't cost as much. It's all risk. It's all gambling.
Also, as a first-time filmmaker, make your life easy. Why, you know, really, it would be
Don't
fantastic.
cast kids.
Yeah, I just watched today this short film that I'm a part of, and it was so good. But then I'm like, my God, they took such risks. There was like 7, the cast alone was like 10 people,
God.
5 locations, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so much work. You know, just watching like a 15-minute piece, and I'm like, oh my God, they really went all out. Like as a filmmaker, we were lucky because we had this location, so we shot and we wrote the script really targeted to that location. And from that, we also had 3 people that we knew we wanted to be on this, you know, in the film, which was Lindsay, Javier, and I. And so we also had a bit more of a restriction of the characters. Like you had to write characters that fit our description and characters. So, you know, but at the same time, I think that having some parameters when it's your first time, it helps. You know, it all helps.
It helps everyone. It helps make a lot of people's jobs easier down the road. Budgeting and scouting and all of that casting.
But just be careful who you pick to work with, because we lived together for a month, you know, like 24/7. And at some point it's difficult. Yeah. You know,
it's like being in a relationship.
It is a relationship, and it's even, the stakes are even higher, because when we were shooting, I was like, this is 506 people's money, and plus whoever else is giving us their time and their place and their, you know.
Yeah, you can't just quit.
We can't quit, and we can't just be like, oh, whatever, it's going to be what it's going to be. Like, you have to go full on all the way and just like try to make it as best as you can.
And that can be a motivator too, though, right? And like that kind of gets the fire under your butt when you're not feeling so good.
Well, it
yes
depends.
And no?
If you do well under pressure and you think stress and fear is a motivator, then this business is for you. You know, it just depends. Like some people crack under the pressure, and we had some people in our production who did, both in pre-production and during the shoot. And you have to just stay strong. You know,
you learn a lot about yourself
and about directing. I read a lot about directors, and Del Toro always says, like, directing is not what you plan. The magic is on the unplanned. The magic happens when the stuff you didn't expect to happen. And that shows how good of a director you are, because if you can figure it out on the spot and find the beauty in that, and then later on, most of the time you see that's the spark. That's the stuff that people really enjoy.
It's having the flexibility. Yeah.
But that's what makes a good director, because shit's going to happen. You know what I mean?
We can't all be Stanley Kubricks and have entire films planned out to a T.
And stuff goes wrong, and if you are Stanley Kubrick and then stuff go wrong and you shut down your production, well, all the power to you if you have that money and time. But most of us don't.
No.
So when that happens, you got to be like, well, for instance, like in our shoot, there's a lake scene, and that was happening overnight. And we had that lake, but our camera broke down. And there was the one day we had to shoot the lake scene. And this is 3 a.m. and we're in Pennsylvania. Our camera comes from New York City. We're calling the guy like, oh my God, what are we going to do? The camera broke. What's happening?
The crew is
We're all like, what are we going to do? We don't have an extra day. We don't have that time. How are we going to fix this? So immediately I'm calling the guy, and the guy's like, I don't know. We're trying to figure it out if it's just a pan, if we can fix it. Turns out it was a red, and he just kind of gave out, and red replaced it for the guy. So it wasn't even like an issue with us. It was just the camera. And apparently happens or something. I don't know, but it happened at the wrong time.
Yeah.
But at the time, like
3 a.m.
It was 3 a.m. Like, what are we going to do? Like, we don't have time to go back to New York City. So my DP was like, well, I have a C300 and I don't think we can tell the difference. I'm going to go home right now. It was like 20 minutes away.
Okay.
I'm going to go get my camera, and then we finished the shoot. And we were like, all right. So he went, that was like 40 minutes. He went and came back, and we were like thinking, okay, how can we rearrange this? What can we shoot? What can we not shoot? And we had to do a couple of inserts after that night of that scene. And our actress, Haley, was amazing because that lake was so smelly.
I wouldn't have known that anything would come up because, that scene, it's seamless. Who did the editing for it?
Well, we had Javier definitely helped with some of that process, and I sat with our editor, Daniel Shaw, for almost a whole year.
Nice.
And we worked through, every single bit of that film.
Because that can be one of the longest processes.
It really was, especially when, we shot for 3 weeks, and we had what we had.
You did all of that in 3 weeks?
It was 15 days and 1 day off. So
wow.
We shot for 16 days, yeah.
That's amazing.
So, having that, we had 3 takes of everything, and just, what Daniel and I did was watch every single piece of footage before they caught action and before, they called cut, to make sure that whatever we had, what could we use, and how can we make this the strongest film possible. And then from there, we went backwards, and it's like, okay, what do we need to reshoot? And we had a couple of reshoot dates. And then go back and put that into the film and try to make the strongest film we could with what we had, And that's, I think, key. It's like we all want to make the perfect movie. We all want to make the next, Oscar winning whatever. But your first film is going to suck. And I remember my friends, I have one friend, Brock Williams, who's a producer, and his movie is on the short list for the Oscars now. And I'm really hope that it happens for them. But I was, I remember him telling me very clearly, he's like, you're thinking about it too much. He's like, my first film cost $20,000. We did it on mini DV, and then he was out in the world. You just got to finish it.
Mm-hmm.
And
don't wait.
That stuck with me because I was like, okay, 20,000 mini DV, just finish it. Like, mine is going to be a little better than that. And I remember thinking,
you go.
Yeah. And I told him that, and he's like, yeah, you will. So stop overthinking it and just get it done, And there were moments that we were discouraged, and we were like, oh, this is never going to end.
Oh, I bet.
And I would, watch a film or have a conversation and be inspired again and email the team and be like, come on, team, we can do this. Or there were moments that Javier would have that moment and share it with the team. Come on, we can do it.
Yeah, that's what I think collaboration is really important for, is those moments when you can't be your own cheerleader. And I certainly get that way. And I feel like it's something that this industry has, because it's so vulnerable. It's so naked putting this out there, something that you spent so much time and you've talked so many other people into spending time on your vision and creating something that you want, and now you're showing it to other people. I can totally see how there would be those moments that you would need another perspective to help you out.
And for me, watching the film with the audience is so hard for me because I know I put so much into it. My acting is okay because it's that's a job. It's my work. I'm confident in what I do. But when you create something from nothing to something, and then people are watching, and you're like, oh my God, are they gonna like it? Are they not gonna like it? And if they don't, it's fine. But it's always so hard for me to watch.
I'm surprised you can watch it. Well, I don't know if I'd be able to.
I don't want to, but then Javier loves watching it with the audience, and he loves that experience. So then I'm like, it always end up staying because I'm like, well, if they're all going to stay, then I should stay. And then I take long walks to the popcorn vending machine and back and but it's weird because there is something different about creating a story from nothing. And Don't Look is a movie that we completely envisioned. It's not at all reflective of our stories, but what we're working on next very much are. And there's a very personal sense to it. Like Scooped, our TV show, it's based on Javier's story of him
York.
becoming a journalist. And like there's a lot of there that's the people there are based on real people. The stories are based on real stories. And, so but that's what makes it universal. Like the more personal, the more universal. So, there's also that power in there of telling a story that means something. But, it's nerve-wracking, maybe because it's my first feature. Maybe I'm going to get more comfortable as it moves along. But I have another short that's on Amazon Prime. It's called December, and it's doing well.
People can catch that? It's called December?
Yeah, December, and it's on Amazon Prime. Take a look. It's only 6 minutes.
We'll put that in the link.
Yeah, it's a super quick watch. It's a drama, so it's a different genre. But it's great. I feel like that's a different film for me because that story is very personal. It's something that... when I wrote it was so real, and it shows in the film, that how real, and it's about heartbreak, and whenever I play it, people come to me and tell me stories about their ex-boyfriends and ex-girlfriends and how they are, they knew, they went through that, and it's funny because now I've listened to so many breakup stories I could write a slew of films, but it's so funny to have that experience, and that to me was different because it was when I made a short, I was like, oh yeah, making a feature is just a longer short. It is definitely not true. It is definitely harder.
Sure seems like a different beast.
It's a completely different thing, and you can never be too prepared, and you will never be prepared enough. Just be ready for that, But I didn't know. I just wanted it to be good, and And
I think indie horror was the right avenue. Would you want to return to horror at some point down the road?
Oh, I love horror. I'm working now on a project called Pathosis. I'm acting in it. I play the female lead, and the team is incredible. We're working with a company called Womp Stomp Films. They did a horror called Never Hike Alone. It's doing really well, and I'm excited. I love the genre, and I think it's innovative. I think there's very few genres that really innovate, and one is porn, which I don't watch, but it's true, they are ahead of the game.
Always an option.
They are ahead of the game. I mean, everything starts there, sex sells. So like VR, for what I hear, is developing because of that industry, and, could do great things. So who knows? And the second one is horror, because we have more of a freedom of telling a story in a different way that doesn't necessarily has to be the format that Hollywood decided that it has to.
Yeah, and historically, the framework is there for you to stand more of a chance with an indie horror film as a newer director.
And play, and play. I think drama is not, it doesn't translate through cultures, unfortunately. Comedy doesn't translate through cultures. It's very culturally based, and horror and action does. And, so you have to decide...
horror and action specifically do amazingly overseas.
Right. Yeah. They're both genres that do really well because it's more of a universal language, and it's less of an emotional connection that I think drama and comedy have.
We've even started to receive more international horror films. I think Mama was a Mexican horror film,
right.
Yeah. And so I love to see more and more stories that aren't about straight white families surviving or whatever. Yeah.
In Mexico, has a huge horror community, and they do very well in what they do.
Yeah, it's George A. Romero. Yeah.
So, there's a lot of stuff coming. I mean, luckily we are at a time where equality and diversity is being, searched and
it's amazing.
And
I want to see more Crazy Rich Asians. I want to see more feature-length films with stories like I've never seen.
I loved Crazy Rich Asians, but I'm like, why do they have to be crazy, beautiful, and rich? Like, I want to see the movie.
Stones.
I want to see the movie like Ugly, Smart, or Ugly, Dumb Asians or something. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be, because there's this need of like success and lavish and luxury, which is interesting.
It's a key that like we understand, I guess. It's like, oh, I know luxury, but I don't know what that luxury looks like. It's like safe.
And we all want that. We all want to see what that's like. So I get how that is a hook, but at the same time I'm like, man, The movie was great. Don't get me wrong.
No. But I understand what you're saying. It's more of a popcorn flick. Yeah.
Right. And now we have In the Heights coming out, and I'm excited to see how that's gonna go. But then it's being directed by an Asian guy.
Oh, really?
John Chu, from Crazy Rich Asians. So then I think, what if it was the opposite? What if they got a Latino guy to direct an Asian movie? The community would just not have it.
That is weird.
So then I'm like, why is it okay in the Latino community? Why is no one talking about that? Like, I want a Latino to talk about the Latino experience. I don't want some Asian guy who never been to, Harlem.
Absolutely.
To Spanish Harlem. Like, what does that guy know?
No, that was one of the important things on that show, Vida, that the entire writing staff and everybody was Latinx or Latina. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tanya Saracho does a fantastic job. She personally handpicked every single person that is on that room and in that room and on that show. Like, she's just, she just, runs a tight ship.
Yeah.
And it shows, because I think Vida has its issues like any other show, but they do something so different and so fresh. And I think it's the first time that Latinos are tuning in, and not just the white people. Like, we want to see that story. Like, I watched the pilot, and it was definitely spicy, beyond the flan jokes. But there was maybe one too many flan jokes. But it was,
The reviews are in.
Yeah, it was super spicy though. Like, some stuff that happened, and I'm like, that's so funny and so fresh, so different, and I think it's a show that everybody should be watching.
Well, my arm's getting tired, so we're going to race toward the end here. Usually what we like to do is... so really quick, the ending is Pamela Voorhees gets decapitated. After slapping Alice around, Alice gets an axe and chops off her head, sails out into the middle of Camp Crystal Lake. The police show up and wave to her and say, hey, we're here to rescue you, only for Jason to pop up and get one more final scare. But, that was just a dream. She wakes up in the hospital, and that's the end.
Or was it a dream?
Or was it? Because he's still out there.
Dun, dun,
and I guess he comes back in the second one. We're going to ignore all that. But so the themes in this movie specifically is that one about parenthood and the idea of, like, Pamela Voorhees psychotically loves her son. Kind of like a Norman Bates, what was his mother's name? Whatever, kind of like a Norman Bates relationship with his mother, but like a little bit backwards. Instead of her being so overbearing that he loves her enough to kill her, she loves her son so much, so overbearing that she's willing to murder others for revenge. Like, he's gone. Killing new counselors isn't going to bring him back, so she's gone. And so the writer, Victor Miller, said in an interview taken off of his own website, quote, I still believe the best part of my screenplay was the fact that a mother figure was the serial killer, working from a horribly twisted desire to avenge the senseless death of her son, Jason. Jason was dead from the very beginning. He was a victim, not a villain, responding to what's happened to Jason and how he has become the villain. And so I feel like that kind of speaks to what you've mentioned, the responsibility that you may or may not feel as a Latina woman to reflect people like you on film, because you recognize the effect that has on audience members and on society as a whole. Movies and TV provide us with, like, the framework and rubric to determine in society what is normal and how we should treat people. And so I'm over the moon when I see a multiracial character as the main character in a movie. When I saw Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Miles Morales is black and Mexican or black and Puerto Rican, I thought that was amazing. And the new lead character in Detective Pikachu is also a black and Asian of some kind. And when I see, like, gay characters being represented on film and movies.
And trans
in a way that's not important. It's not, they're the gay character, they're the lesbian, they're the trans. It's they're the person who incidentally happens to be gay or be trans, but that's not important to the story.
They're part of the population and they're amazing, and most of the time they're more amazing than the regular, straight.
They're not stereotypes. They're not comic relief. And, like, God, there were entire movies like I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry and Love Boat, and these movies that the whole movie was, isn't it funny that they're gay? And there are TV shows where it's like, isn't it funny that they're Mexican, or isn't it funny that they're Asian? It's this movie takes that responsibility, I feel like, and even though it's written by a man, he chooses to subvert the assumption that women, like you said, are matronly and caretakers and couldn't hurt a fly.
Yeah, I think there's a time to rethink what's regular and what's normal and what's just the world.
So you do feel a responsibility, kind of.
100%. I think we all do. Everybody who is out there making some kind of art. I mean, everybody, I was having a conversation yesterday with a filmmaker about this, about the fact, we saw on the news recently this MAGA kid harassing a Native American. But my problem with that now is like everybody's making him famous. His face is on everything. And I'm like, why is that guy not, going to jail for harassment? That's harassment. If I was that Native American guy, I would have walked into the first precinct and be like, this guy harassed me, arrest him. That's an exaggeration, but I'm like, I don't want to make those people famous. I don't want to make their faces known. There is an upside to that, shaming that person publicly in the hopes that that's going to change their perception, which most of the time it doesn't happen. So, it's a catch-22. But I think we all are responsible for the things that we say. And, I always say that if you are going to make a stand, you got to stand by it, regardless of the consequences.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, and that's why I'm like, for me, like this perception of what's normal and what's not and what's right and what's wrong, it doesn't exist. We're all part of something and we're all in it together. And, I love these inspirational quotes, and they always say like, your life is also mine and your experience is also mine. And we see that every day. If somebody's having a bad day and they're mean to you, then now you're having a bad day and then you're mean to the next person. And it's just like kind of a chain effect.
Yeah.
So that really happens. And if you think about that in that sense, in that palpable real life sense. So I try to speak clearly and openly about my beliefs, but I also sometimes I'm sure I've mishaps said something that wasn't clearly stated. But there's
you
a
recognize
difference.
That.
Yeah, but there's a difference. Even us, as we're having this conversation, we're thinking, oh, why does the killer has to be male? We just assume that it is. And in this movie, Friday the 13th was so groundbreaking at the time because everybody thought that this killer was a male because that's our perspective, but in reality it was a woman. Ooh, wow.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, so that's so different, because women are nurturers. So, that's the thing that art does to break grounds. But I have to say, the next, I'm just tired of seeing Mexicans as gardeners in a movie. Like whenever
or
I say that,
or drug dealers.
I turn off because it's like, unless it's a historical piece, unless it's something that like, oh, it's a true story of something.
Oh, sure,
and that's
yeah.
how
if
it
it's
happened.
a period, yeah, then it's...
Yeah, like Narcos. Like Narcos about the drug trafficking.
Narcos is great.
It's great, but it's about that. That's the story. That's one thing versus like, let's just make movies and portray Latinos this particular way.
And so no, that raises an interesting idea that I hadn't considered, is that like you can picket, you can petition, you can boycott something, but it seems like the not best way, but maybe one of the quickest ways to enact social change is to make lots of TV shows and movies and stories that normalize the thing that you're looking to do so in society. That if you're looking to make it so trans people are accepted anywhere and can go into the bathroom anywhere, then we need more trans TV shows like that Ryan Murphy one on FX, Pose, or Transparent to a lesser extent. That one's a little dicey because it's
a lot of family story drama,
and he's also not really trans, which is problematic.
Right.
Even though there are a number of trans actors in the show, the main character himself, Jeffrey Tambor, is not.
But think about when that started. At the time, it was the only show addressing that issue.
That's why it's very important.
Huge. Yeah.
And like we said before,
impact. Yeah, the impact was huge when it came to that. It's difficult times that we're at. It's the times that we are finally free to embrace our diversity and our differences, but it's also the time that other people feel like they're free to speak about their hatred and their and their prejudices. And it's confusing I can imagine being a preteen at this time and trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong. Because that comes from home. Whatever example you have, I feel like so lucky I came from a place like Brazil that I had to learn about poverty and struggle and fight for what you want and what you believe in.
That must give you a great perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's sure. Did I wish I was born in an easy home where everything was fine and you had everything? Who didn't? But it did teach me a lot, and it's a big part of who I am. And I think it makes me a better filmmaker for sure, because I never see something and think, oh, I don't have it, I can't do it. I always think about it. Oh, I don't have it. How can I make it? Or how can I find a way to put it together? Do I really need it anyways? That's my thought process. And I've seen other people that have been more privileged and, lucky, who just at the first wall just gave up, like, oh, there's a wall, I'm just not gonna go there. You know, and that's a choice. At the end of the day, I always say life is a choice.
I don't have any kids. Do you have any kids?
Well, I have one dog. I consider him my kid.
So you would do anything for that dog?
I would do anything for
You
Spike.
would slaughter a bunch of teenagers at a camp for that dog.
If I believed in violence, I would. I'm more likely to bake a bunch of cookies for all those kids to forget the issues of their lives.
That's the thing. It's like, I can't relate to this idea. Like, it's one thing to want to protect a living child at any cost. Like, I'd take a bullet for, like, my sister or something like that. But it's totally different to take something that is already done and I'm, like, grieving, and to take that out on the type of people that represent the thing. Yeah, no, it's a thing that kind of plays on another thing, which is that people with insanity are dangerous and evil and will murder all the time. And so Pamela Voorhees could probably benefit from some medication and going to a therapist, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, jokes aside, like, mental illness is a real problem, and we see that a lot in America with the mass shootings and all that stuff. But yes, it's definitely somebody who is unbalanced, and
it's represented.
Some medication of sorts. But you know, grief is something that messes with people in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And as we've seen through, you know, these examples in real life and serial killers and other people, that it does manifest that way. So it is based somehow in, like, the real life.
That's why I feel that Pamela is a sympathetic villain in that way. You only get to see her for 20 minutes. She's got top billing. Pamela Voorhees is played by Betsy Palmer, who was apparently a prolific soap opera actress at the time. So people would have recognized her, but she's only in it at the end. And we get, like, so much pathos in, like, 2 lines of dialogue. She just barrels out, I worked here, my son died, you killed him. But I think it paints her sympathetically, because she is just a grieving mother who didn't quite make it to acceptance. She's stuck in bargaining, maybe. Whereas,
I mean, the fact that she's still listening to her kid's voice.
A little bit of that's dissociative identity, yeah.
Right. So that's huge too when it talks about her actual issues as a murderer. You know, it's funny because I'm kind of fascinated about people who do murder, you know, like documentaries and stuff like that. So I am always like, I think forensic science is probably groundbreaking and one of the things that changed, you know, the course of criminology in general. But I'm always fascinated because I'm like, what drives people to really cross that line, and like how does that manifest, you know? And where were there signs, you know?
And horror is a great way to get a key into that.
I watched one documentary, and there's a tip for whoever's making a movie, and it was this documentary showed the story of people who killed their families through their social media only. So throughout the entire film, you only learn about these people through their own social media. So
That's
every single shot of that film was their Facebook, their Instagram, their Twitter, photos that they've posted with obviously the narration. And it was so interesting to see, because what they're trying to discover is, like, can you know when there's something wrong? Can you figure it out?
What's that called? What's the documentary?
I have to remember.
That sounds
I don't remember the name, but it was so great.
Okay, yeah, you'll have to let me know.
Yeah, I wonder if it was. I don't know. I don't remember where I watched it, but what platform. But I remember at the end of that thinking, you just don't never know. You see a guy who posts on Facebook like, oh, I'm so lucky, with a picture of his wife and 2 kids, and then he ends up, you know, a week later killing all of them, including his 8-month pregnant wife. You know, and it's like, where are the signs? Like, where are the signs? Did we miss something? I think it's the one thing people always ask. But when you look at those clear posts and those things, like, you don't know. You don't know if there's something wrong with someone.
Yeah. It's kind of like suicide, too. It's really hard to tell when people are being serious or when they're... And that's why it's a good rule of thumb to always take any red flag as 100% serious.
Right. And for people out there who are suffering, who need help, there are ways, you know, go online, find a resource. I know it's hard when you're feeling depressed. Depression is a real problem.
Yeah, it's a real shame. The suicide hotline is like 18 digits. It's unfortunate, but yeah.
Right. By the time you get to it, something already happened. But
they killed a snake in this movie. I thought that was horrible. That snake scene where it comes in, that was a real snake that they chopped up with a machete, and the thing on IMDb said that the owner of the snake was crying off set. And I thought, what did they say to the snake owner?
Well, they didn't know know that the snake was going to be murdered.
Hey, buddy, can we see your snake in this scene really quick? We promise we'll give it right back. In fact, we got 2 snakes.
We had a pig in our film in Don't Look, and when you watch it, you'll see it's kind of hanging there. Mm-hmm. We really debated whether or not we wanted to use a real animal, but we actually ended up feeding 200 people with that pig afterwards.
Oh, great.
So we made a big cookout. We
Something to waste.
got the community. No, we would never do that if it would went to waste. But we actually made it into a community thank you. We brought everybody from the area who was around and who would like to come, and we did a nice little bake-off, and it was a nice way to give back to the community.
That's amazing. Well, last but not least, we'd like to talk about our rating for the movie. We like to rate the movie that we watched on a scale of 1 to 5 thumbs, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best, based on whatever you want under the sun. Luciana, what'd you think of Friday the 13th?
Always a 5.
Always 5? You gave it 5 thumbs?
Oh, yeah.
How come?
I love it. I think it's the birth of a genre. How wrong can you go? And it started the idea of having sequels because it's open-ended. That was also something new. And the fact that the killer was a woman. I mean, we still now, I think women killers are still considered hysterical. They're not like smart, calculated killers.
I can't think of one, and that's a shame.
Yeah, but I guess we'll get there,
Yeah.
But at the same time, it did break grounds for people like me who came after and was able to just make something out of nothing.
That's true, yeah. And so traditionally we will assign our thumbs to characters in the movie. So who are you going to give your 5 thumbs to?
It's a tough one.
You can give them all to one character, or you can spread them out as you like.
Well, I'll give it to the killer.
To Pamela?
I think Pamela deserves it.
She's probably collecting them from all the teens throughout the movie.
Yeah, she deserves it. I feel like that was, especially if she was a soap star, I'm sure she, that brought the audience in at the time. And it's nice to see a woman spearheading anything.
Yeah. Well, Friday the 13th came out in 1980, and I'm so glad that you picked this movie, because I feel like I thought I had seen it all the way through, but I guess I'd missed some stuff, because there were some wonderful moments in this. Some dips in like the middle, like toward the end, right before the last person dies, it kind of dips down, and I'll be honest, I started to nod off a little bit. I didn't sleep, but I started to nod off and had to rewind a couple of times. So it didn't keep my interest the whole time, but as a catalyst to the slasher genre, it's amazing. It's up there with Halloween, and it's up there with A Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's a classic, even if Jason isn't in the original. That said, I'm going to give Friday the 13th 4 thumbs. Just 4. That's okay. It's not perfect. The last movie I gave 5 thumbs to was Society. Have you seen Society?
I haven't.
Oh, that's a gross one. I love that one. And my 4 thumbs are going to go to, I'm going to give one of them to Bill, one of the kids played by, Bill Brown, played by Harry Crosby III, Bing Crosby's son, because he plays classical guitar in that one scene, and so he's probably going to need that thumb. I'm going to give the other 2 thumbs to Ralph, so that he can tell people who's got 2 thumbs and is totally nuts. This guy. And finally, I'll give the last one to Jason himself, played by Ari Lehman, a character that originally wasn't even going to be in the movie. This actor muscled his way in and got to be Jason himself. Yeah. So that's Friday the 13th. Let's see, was there anything else that you wanted to say about Don't Look? Did you want to mention those festival dates, or I guess those are still up in the air?
Yeah, they're still pending. I would just say please keep checking our social media, and once it's out there, do watch it. Give us as many thumbs as you'd like, but we hope you watch it.
Yeah, we'll be following you along, and we'll see how well that does in May.
Yes, we always say that our film is the little engine that could, so we're still out there.
Well, we think you can. We think you can.
Thank you.
Stay scary out there.
The Gory Days.
A teeny tiny Ben Kingsley